Hi there, this is Brother Ben, Bhante Rakkhita Samanera, and today I'm going to be looking at the East and West philosophical perspectives and comparing and contrasting them on issues such as their ideas about eternity, infinity, love, theism, deism, and soul views. Let's zoom in first of all on Confucius, and this is a anglicized version of his Chinese name. But as we can see, he's a non-deist, and he had a strong belief in in rituals and rules and roles, and he had a strong belief in eternity and a soul view. There's some of the quotes, for example, from the Analects, written in the 5th to the 4th century BC. Virtue is neighbourly. So a soul view, but a non-deist. And we don't really know about his views about the post-mortem experience, about what happens to the consciousness after death. Confucius was an accomplished musician and enjoyed playing the zither in his leisure time. He had a penchant for gardening and found solace in cultivating bonsai trees, which he saw as a reflection of his teachings on harmony and balance. Another quote from him: "Learning without thought is labour lost. Thought without learning is perilous." So we heard that about his soul view, that he was a non-deist, and Confucius was known for his love of storytelling, and he often used parables to convey his moral teachings. He had a mischievous sense of humour and enjoyed playing practical jokes on his disciples to teach them valuable lessons. So let's have a look at another Chinese philosopher nearby him, and that will be Lao Tse. And if I can just take a pause and zoom back in on him here. Let's go there. So Lao Tse, a quote from him which sums up his attitude from the Tao Te Ching. And he's 6th century BC, he's a little bit before, quite a little bit before. In nature, nature is unhurried, yet all is achieved. He had a soul view. About deism and theism, it's unclear what his views were there. And it's unknown about his concept of the post-modern experience. So this is in contrast to people like the Buddha, who had a very clear description of pre and post death and birth. Lao Tse was said to have a penchant for wandering. He was often disappearing into the wilderness for even years at a time. He had an unusual fondness for collecting unusual rocks and stones, which he believed held spiritual significance. His life mirrors that enigmatic nature of his philosophical teachings. Another quote from the Tao Te Ching: "Knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment." He had this soul view, and Lao Tse had a deep appreciation for simplicity and often lived with a minimalist lifestyle, owning very few possessions. He was known for his love of poetry and frequently composed verses inspired by the beauty of nature and the human spirit. Let's take a look at the Buddha and move on from both Confucius and Lao Tse. The Buddha had a much clearer and distinct teaching that was much more categorized, it was much more organized, and it had much more a metaphysical aspect to it than, say, Confucius, that was much more socially organizing. So the Buddha, a quote from the Dhammapada, and the Buddha was 400 BCE to 450 BCE era, this is approximate. "The mind is everything. what you think, you become. So the actual quote is more like, the mind precedes or is the forerunner of events and phenomena. Mind precedes everything. But what you think definitely has a strong effect on you. He had a non-soul view, and he had this anatta doctrine of no permanent entity. He was a non-deist in a strange kind of way, because his teachings allowed people to assume that he was including lots of anthropomorphic gods and deities that he could communicate with. So he did allow for that. And he also had a strong belief in rebirth and the 31 realms of existence, which were higher and lower than the human realm. Buddha was known for his exceptional skill in debate. He often engaged in intellectual discussions with scholars, philosophers, kings, princes, and lay people. He had a playful side. He enjoyed telling humorous stories to his disciples to illustrate profound truths, such as you see in the Jataka tales. Let's move on to Plato. So, Plato in Greece, he was around 380 BC. And a quote from him from the Republic: compelled knowledge lacks hold. So it's very much like comparing knowledge to stones that you put in the mouth, or as compared to sweets or food. It just falls out because there was no real hunger for it in the first place. Compelled knowledge lacks hold. He had a soul view. He was a theist. And he had a belief also in immortality. So that's a kind of eternity of self or soul. Plato had a fascination with mathematics, and he believed that abstract forms governed the material world. He was known for his love of astronomy and spent many nights stargazing, contemplating the mysteries and the cosmos. Plato's allegory of the cave illustrates his belief in the transcendent nature of reality. Another quote from the Republic: we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. So as we said, he had a soul view and he was a theist. He had that belief in immortality. And Plato was an accomplished athlete in his youth and excelled in wrestling and in gymnastics. He had a deep love for literature and often incorporated poetry into his philosophical dialogues, blending aesthetics with metaphysics. Good. So let's move on to a more modern person, a more modern philosopher in France in 1641. So we're going to take a little bit of a jump across time, which is the beauty of this type of looking at the issues. And that is with René Descartes. Okay, let's go to him. So obviously with his most famous quotation there, I think therefore I am, which is an interesting comparison with some other teaching. He had a soul view. Descartes was a Christian, and therefore he was also a theist. He had a strong belief in the afterlife as well. Descartes had a peculiar habit of waking up at precisely 11 o'clock a.m. every morning, regardless of when he went to bed. He was an avid collector of exotic seashells, and often spent hours cataloguing and studying their intricate designs. Descartes' method of doubt challenged conventional wisdom and laid the groundwork for modern philosophy. A quote of his, we're talking about 1641, from Meditations, in Latin, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Descartes had a fondness for mechanical inventions and spent much of his free time tinkering with clocks and other gadgets. He had a keen interest in optics and conducted experiments on light and vision, contributing to the development of modern optics. Good. Let's move on to a more modern person in the shape of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, that's to the right zone. Here we go. Yeah, here we are. So, Nietzsche, a quote from the Twilight of the Idols. So we're talking about now 1889 period. A quote from that. Purpose endures hardship. So he's got a very teleological look at life, that there is a meaning and a purpose at that point. Anyway, purpose endures hardship. He had a soul view and he was a non-deist. And we're not sure about what his view of the postmodern experience is, listed as unknown there. Some facts. Nietzsche was an avid hiker and often found inspiration for his philosophical ideas during his mountainous excursions. Nietzsche had a quirky sense of fashion and was often seen wearing eccentric clothing, including brightly coloured socks and unusual hats. Nietzsche's existentialist philosophy confronts the absurdity of existence and the necessity of creating meaning in a chaotic world. Another quote from Twilight of the Idols. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Nietzsche had a deep love for animals and often wrote about the bond between humans and animals in his works. He was an accomplished pianist and composed several pieces of music, which he believed expressed his philosophical ideas more powerfully than his words. So that concludes today's video about East and West contrasts and comparisons and alignments also. And thank you for watching. I encourage you to like, share, subscribe, and for more content, and look forward to the upcoming videos. Take care, and I hope you enjoyed today's session.